I am Candace Steele. I'm representing the Page Society, and I'm so grateful that you all joined this morning. I want to share a few disclaimers. So today we're going to talk about what we've seen early in our research, and I'm calling it the measurement paradox. And the reason for that is because we find ourselves, as we've been hearing throughout this conference, in a very interesting space with AI. And I'm going to just talk about it from the standpoint of what we're being asked to do and how that impacts measurement. And I actually view it as an opportunity. So here's the disclaimer. What you're seeing is preliminary data. These data actually locked yesterday. So it's fresh. I pulled a sample on Thursday before I headed here. So you're getting a sneak preview. This also means that when these data are released next month, if some of the numbers change, even though I've been tracking them, they're directional, please don't call me and say, Candace, you said 74%, it's 72, but directional. But we find it interesting, and I thought it might be helpful. So for those of you who don't know about the Page Society, we are, we like to say, one of the premier organizations for senior communicators around the world. Our members represent some of the leading companies, educational institutions, in some cases governments, NGOs. I actually have been a Page member for 8 years. I was a former CCO in financial services, industrial technology, and medical device. And in December, I actually joined the Page staff, leading our research and our professional development. Also in my spare time, I earned my doctorate of management in 2016, and I've been studying and looking at the intersectionality of the multi-generational workplace, leadership, and communication. So I was one of those people in my spare time. I like to learn. And now I'm in a place where I can bring my passion for research and leadership and communication into one place. So let's get started. I'm going to share a key finding that I pulled together just for this audience because I believe that it speaks to a lot of what you can help us with and what we'll need to consider as we adopt AI. And here you see some findings from this data set, and it really says that 2/3 of our members who participated in our studies, who were the CCOs, public affairs officers, senior leaders, are being asked by their leadership to adopt AI. So it's not a bottom up, a top down. However, they're not being asked to measure it and look at the impact. And so, as we've seen, there's a rush to adopt. However, no one's really looking at the value or how to measure it. And I can tell you as a communicator, I find myself in this place where, once again, we're rushing to adoption, but maybe we might be judged by someone else. And so this is actually an inflection point and an opportunity. To give you just a little bit of context, this particular research, and we like to say it's for us, so it's for our Page members, but we share it broadly by our Page members, and it's actually part of a system. And the system, dare I use my pointer, starts with what we call our quantitative benchmark study. And so this is our second time doing it, and we look at everything that you might think in terms of structure, size, demographics, but this year we also looked at AI adoption, influence, governance, and a wide variety of topics. This particular year 2 data will be released next month. It just locked yesterday, so we're going to be busy over the next several weeks, but we're really excited to release the data. Last year's data are available on our website. Then we're also going to use this to inform another body of work, which we call the functional framework. And this is a tool that will also be released next month, which will allow the users to look at 10 different dimensions and help them develop their function. And so it's a part of a system. And because when you start work, it's always great to be able to have peer exchange, we have affinity groups that we launched in January where members who are working on measurement or their structure, their function, can get together and talk about it. So we've created this solution. We call it the Page Navigator. It's a unique system. It starts with research, then it allows us to have tools for application, and then groups. So we like to look at our strategy through the lens of insights, conversation, and then application. So here's a little bit about the samples, about a little over 175 members. These are senior communicators who participated around the world, a cross-section of industry types and sector types. And so we're really excited about these participants who were willing to spend about 20 minutes to share their insights. And so these data began around April 1. I pulled a sample on Thursday before I came here. I want to spend a moment talking about this. So I mentioned that I've been a Page member for 8 years, having led communications for over 25 years, and aware of the Barcelona principles. And one of our members, Sandra, is in the back of the room. I'm not going to point her back or say the role she's in, but we were actually in one of those affinity group calls earlier this year. And it was an affinity group call, so a small virtual setting of our members, and we were talking about measurement. And what was interesting to me, and I joined as a staff member in December, but what was interesting to me was the creative tension on the call. Sandra smiled. I kindly stated that because it was kind of like a Miller Lite debate. There were some people on one end of the spectrum of measurement who were saying we have to use the standards. Like if you're going to be having these conversations, let's look at the Barcelona principles, look at these well-established tools and resources that are available to really show impact. And then there were other people who were saying, listen, I just need to push the button to send the email and look at open rate. It was all over the place, which speaks to how a lot of organizations, some I've been a part of, have been in terms of where they are in their maturity as it relates to communications. And so having that in my mind, less than 30 days or so on the job, I thought about going into this next benchmark survey and to really add value and to move the profession along, to evolve where we're going. I actually looked at a lot of the different standards that were out there. And when we were shaping the questions, and there are about 15 different questions that we asked around measurement to evaluate, I pulled from these because the thinking is, and we're hoping that you may find these data valuable, is that we should understand where our members are on the continuum and have data so that we know where we go next. And I also had an opportunity to meet some AMEC members in January at an IPR event. And through that very brief conversation, it reminded me about the importance of having a global perspective on our profession. So I thank you for those insights, and I hope when you see these data, the full set next month, that you will appreciate that we're building it in a way that will provide value for the profession. All right, so let's get into it. I talked about some of the observations that informed some of the questions, and so we looked through 15 different dimensions of what people were measuring. And what we found was that, they were measuring what you might think, everything from, media exposure all the way to what shows up on the balance sheet. But here was what was interesting. Net Promoter Score. That particular metric has caused consternation, I think, for over a decade of conversations that I've been in. Going back to the analogy of the Miller Lite debate, taste great, less filling. Almost every senior leader that I've been in a room with have said, stop doing this, stop using it. However, it's still being used and reported to the CEO board. So it's still an interesting metric, so we're going to have to prosecute that from a communicator's perspective versus a marketer's. But what I was looking at was really, as we go through it, what's on the balance sheet? And how are we reconciling the things that communicators can add value? And so what we're going to be looking at is the gap between the work that we're doing and then what's getting reported to the board or the CEO to map influence, and taking us on a journey to be able to really do a better job of showing value. And the full report will show all the different dimensions and where we are. And then we're also going to be looking at by industry, by geography, where people are leading, and taking those learnings back and having broader conversations. The other aspect of the study was looking at preparedness. And so we looked at, I think, 23 different areas of what was important to our members in terms of an issue versus how prepared they are. And then I took the cut for AI, since I know that's a topic that we're going to be discussing today. And just to take a minute, I'm going to start at the bottom of this slide. So what was really great to see was that there was a lot of our members recognize the importance of a crisis or issue. And by and large, they're prepared. However, when we look at some of these other issues that are really germane to where we need to go as a profession, particularly in this era of AI, you're seeing a quarter or so less prepared. And so that's going to be an opportunity for those who are advising and supporting. It's also an opportunity for us in terms of those who are providing the research as well as looking at professional development for the field. Earlier, I talked about 3/4 of members are being asked by their senior leadership to engage in activity as it relates to AI. I want to take a moment on this slide to give you an idea of where our members are engaging. So we went into this thinking that the adoption stage was very low. However, you can see about a third of members or more actually well along in an adoption stage early into AI. Less so embedding it into strategy. And that would make sense when there's a new tool or resource that's been active, a lot of people rush to use, which is great, not as many. And when we think about where they are in terms of adoption or using agents, there's a pretty high adoption, but most of it is using tools like, a Gemini or Claude or OpenAI's ChatGPT drafting content. So using it very tactically, which you might expect. I would submit that also creates a challenge because we're rushing to the tactical implementation and not thinking about some of the broader issues or governance. What's exciting, though, is in an emerging area here is that some of our members are using agents or deploying agents to do simulation. And what I mean by that is that they are putting together panels or putting together audiences to test and learn to do some scenario planning, which is really interesting. The other opportunity that we've talked about as we've been tracking these data is the ability for AI to be predictive. And so this is an area to fully explore, and we're partnering with a number of different organizations to educate our members and to start getting them more and more involved with learning how to use agents and deploy agents responsibly. But the major concern that we're seeing emerge is that while there is widespread adoption, there's actually a tension with accountability. And from a measurement perspective, there's not a lot of attention being played on stopping to appreciate the value that it's delivering to the organization, or measuring it, or understanding it. And as I think about how our profession can evolve, this is a risk, because we run the opportunity of having these widely used in our organization, and then someone else can define the value. And the impact. And so the longer we wait to not do that, we run the risk of another discipline actually determining what it is and us catching up. So this is an opportunity for us here. And what we're seeing early on in our data is that this could be an opportunity and a risk. We also looked at, in terms of governance and adoption, who owns it? And so for those of you who maybe remember when the internet came online and then social media came online, there's all the turf wars. And so we looked at, well, who owns it? And what we found is that, you know, there's some shared governance, but it's mixed in terms of who really owns it and who's really influencing it. Now, I'm not saying for those of you who are leading comms or counseling comms leaders that they automatically rush to do this. But what the data do suggest, it's worth a conversation. And it's worth reflecting on, is this the best structure for your strategy? Now, having had a long, wonderful relationship with chief information officers in my career, I would say that this may have worked in certain settings. However, as we've started to adopt AI, I've been in conversations with people who've said it might be better to have access to multiple tools. But then I've been in conversations with people who said we only use one, and they weren't part of that discussion to determine it. And maybe that could work. What these data suggest is there's an opportunity to think about your governance structure and where the communications or public affairs officer or corporate affairs officer sits in that decision set. And then also how they're participating in the conversation in terms of how it's being deployed or adopted in the enterprise. So I believe that, and I'm an optimist, that actually AI can help us in terms of our journey to measurement. And even though we're still working through where it's going to take us, the fact that our senior leaders are encouraging members to use it, there's this white space in terms of measurement, it's an opportunity for us. And because it's moving so quickly, I would argue that it's time for us to take a moment to slow down and make sure that we're contemplating where we're sitting in the governance as well as the accountability. And that's some of the work that we're going to do now that we have these data. And so I open up our question set about where we are right now to just get your insights in terms of where you are on the journey, where you see these data adding value, where you think we should go next, and then conclude by just saying, as these stakes are getting raised, I think it's an opportunity for us to move in now before we are left out and disrupt ourselves in this process so that we can have more opportunity as we move forward.
Thank you so much. This is so interesting, and now we're going to go into a Q&A. And because I ended up on this stage this morning, I'm actually going to do the first one, if that's okay with everybody. Sure. These numbers are really, really interesting, and I find it's so much opportunity, as you say. But if we look at also the demand in upskilling in the profession, how would you say we need to tackle that? Not only for communicators, but also for leadership to fully understand the implications of AI into the organizations?
Thank you for that question. So I would say we should tackle the upskilling in multiple ways. And we're looking at that. The first is, and you've already seen the data, just get involved and start learning and trying. And it's really interesting because depending on where you are in the world, if we look at from a leader's perspective, a lot of us are trained in risk. And so maybe we were slow to adopt because we want to protect. And then depending on security, whether you were using it in a workplace setting or at home, some people were reluctant. I early adopted. As soon as I learned, I started using. And so, and we see that there's great adoption right now. And so the very first is if you're skittish, just to try, to test and learn. And the other thing that's great is this year in particular, many organizations are doing that training. We certainly are doing it. And so I would say that there are a lot of podcasts and courses to just adopt and to try, to just start. But the other part of it is to be more structured about it. So as you're thinking about it in terms of your teams and where you see it may add value, and from a generative AI perspective, I would say that most people are adopting. But to come up with a taxonomy for your teams to understand how they can use it, yep, and to understand where it adds value, that's where I would start. And then I would say as soon as you feel comfortable, which wouldn't take very much time. I was in an audience 2 years ago with Sam Altman, and he was talking about when they were developing ChatGPT, they wanted to do it in the lowest common denominator so that even a child could adopt it. So check that box. But where it's quickly going is understanding how to use agents. And so as soon as you understand that, I would encourage to create incubator opportunities to learn how to deploy several agents moving quickly, because that's going to move very quickly, and I think that some people will find value there. Yeah. And the other part of it is just open conversation. I speak a lot with educators and young people, and a lot of academic institutions are on a different continuum in terms of encouraging students to use it. And so we're seeing younger professionals coming in skittish about using it.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. I can see that even in my own son, who's 18, and he was very reluctant. And then we pushed him to take an AI course, and he aced it. And now he's like, oh, I get it, how I do it, and I don't have to be afraid of it. So I think that it's a lot about just opening doors and making sure that people try it.
And we heard yesterday that it's just a tool, so I would reinforce it's just one more tool in our armamentarium of things we can use. And so if we start with the mindset that it's just a tool, you can use and apply it safely, test and learn yourself, think about how you can bring it into your organization in a responsible way, encourage people to do it. I used to have Learning Fridays with my teams. And I would say every Friday for an hour, we're going to learn something. And so back then it was, okay, let's use AI. But I found that I had to bring them on cooking and screaming. And then now I think we're in a place where for those who've adopted how to do it responsibly so that you're not just defaulting to it and then not checking.
I find it so interesting that, sort of the mindset, because I think I was there too, and now I've sort of routed in a different direction. So I actually see it as my co-worker, but that's just me. I'm going to open the floor for more questions. Yes, Jim. Can we have yes?
Thank you. Thank you for the doing the research, and thank you for the presentation. I just, if I may, wanted to make a comment and a suggestion. Very appropriately in your presentation and throughout this summit, we've talked about value, adding value, and yet our language is constantly resorts to measurement. I know we mean evaluation, but we're still talking about measurement, and I think it's really important in this field to get beyond taking measures, because measurement is just a set of numbers and indicators, and it means nothing. We have to interpret that, compare it to objectives, etc. So I know I'm playing on semantics, but I think it's very important because our field is focused primarily on taking measures and then we don't do much with them. We've got to go to evaluation that interprets those measures into the organisation's perceptions of what value it's seeking. So I just make that suggestion that we constantly talk about measurement commissions, doing measurement. We should be in the business of evaluation and beyond evaluation, interpreting and recommending things to management. So that's just a suggestion.
Oh, 100%. And that's one of the reasons why I feel that we see this tension. Like because when I started, we looked at not only what are you measuring, but what are you reporting? And what are you reporting to the CEO and board? And then how close it is to what's on the balance sheet. Yes. Right, well, that's what I'm saying. And the question is, we're not, I 100% agree with you. And so what we want to look at is value. And I just hate the term return on investment. But what we're looking at is actually value back to the, value back to the enterprise and getting, yeah. Yes. Point taken and appreciated.
Thank you so much for this idea. Thank you so much for this fantastic presentation, Candace. Happy to listen to you and to know these primary findings from this study. This is Clara Fontan from Corporate Excellence Center for Reputational Leadership. We really follow all the things that you are doing in PACE Society. I wanted to share with you some comments when you were explaining us what this measure or this perspective of senior leaders or communication leaders, what they are measuring right now. I was missing reputation. And also I was missing employee engagement in these top ranking indicators that they are using. So reputation, trust, social legitimacy, and how you protect value and make it growth. Yeah. So I don't know if there are more indicators here and we have only the most important one for them.
Yes, so there are 15 different ones that we looked at.
Okay.
And so my point here is that I was looking at where we have the biggest gap, but we looked at reputation, we looked at CSR, we looked at public affairs measurements, we looked at engagement, so we looked at 15 different ones.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Just to see, so looking forward to seeing the final result. And the last idea, it's the first time that I see in this summit how the concept of corporate affairs. And I don't know if you are seeing an evolution of communication leaders to this function, corporate affairs, integrating this global perspective about intangible assets like engagement, public affairs, also the brand power, reputation, trust. So how they are evolving. So are you seeing something regarding that? Even the name of the position, like corporate affairs, with this transversal point of view of managing.
So, we did measure that, and we also looked at what was in their remit. And what we've decided to do, what we decided to do is to look at this in phases as part of the functional framework. So we did ask what was in your remit for members, because it's interesting. The title doesn't always reflect the actual body of work. So there were times when I was a chief communications officer, but in another setting I was corporate affairs or I was public affairs. So we looked at it separately. And then for our functional framework, this particular tool, we're starting with what you think of as traditional corporate communications, but then we're adding additional remits to CCO plus public affairs, plus ESG, plus marketing. And so we're actually going to tackle that here. But we will report out on what are the other areas that are a part of it. But we didn't do it by title because we're finding that the titles don't always match depending on where you are by industry or where you are in the world.
Okay, thank you so much.
But I'll take that note back. Because I know it's a point of interest, so thank you.
Hi, we're moving along the row here.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Can I ask you, I'm interested in your opinion on something. There's a lot of talk about ownership and responsibility, and I can understand in the agency world, and I can see the opportunities, and I can see there's a business imperative, but in the NGO sector or in the government communications that I'm in or in that public sector, what is your opinion about, should we be fighting for it? should we be fighting for governance and control of AI, or are we fighting for a partnership? Your data was interesting in that it's split between, say, communications and the AI, of communications and ICT. And I know in my government department we have a limited co-pilot, and it has been brought in by the IT department as an IT tool because they're monitoring it from a governance point of view. But I'm wondering, I'm interested to know, like, should I be putting my hand up and saying, I want a conversation, I want to be at that table, I want my team to own it?
So I'll answer it in two ways. I'll answer it based on what our data say, and then I'll give you my opinion. So our data suggests that, at least the way we frame the questions, the data suggests that of these different organizations, and I'll have to go back and look where it is by sector, but the data suggests that at least a third of our members, it's owned by that department. We didn't ask, are you happy with that decision? So note to self for next year. But for me, what's most concerning is the governance layer, right? Because I would always say, when people would say, well, why are you in this meeting? It doesn't have anything to do with you, because if you all mess it up, it's gonna have something to do with me. And so I would say, my opinion, this is the part you wanna fight for, right? Because your strategy and where you are, it just, I don't know, like from a budget perspective or where you are, but you definitely want to understand the policies and procedures. That, to me, this is the place. Whether you own, and then you want to be able to have a say. So at the very least, you definitely, if I had to put them in order, one, you control your own destiny. But, I would say I would say close tie between either sharing it, because there's a lot of benefit to collaboration and getting feedback, and yesterday we had that conversation. So I would say here and here, these are the opportunities, for sure.
I see a turf war coming up. I'm so sorry, but we need to cut it here. But I want to give a big hand for this amazing session.
So these data will be available next month. I appreciate your insights, and I'll be here for additional questions.
Yeah, we